Soul by Julie Cadwallader Staub. One thing Darwin can't explain is the sound of the wind in the trees. The trees gain no advantage when their leaves rustle and moan, but when we listen to the wind in the trees, suddenly we are four-dimensional beings slipping from our too tight skins, shedding time, priorities, need. Oh, to embrace what we love, to embrace what we love, who we are becoming. Oh, to lose fear, to forget its name entirely. The future is in the tug of our hearts, the wind in the trees, always upward, outward, bracing and embracing. We rise to the sound. Good evening, friends. Thank you for zooming into the slipstream of our gusty gathering this evening. I'm Reverend Julie Brooks, and I'm joined this evening by my sibling in the sea breeze, Reverend Claudia Cohn. I also want to thank David Renata, our techno wayfinder in this Zoom Zephyr. Thank you, David. There is a Zen koan. Be an ancient tree in high wind. This teaching brings to mind a way of approaching and engaging the breezes and blusters that billow and blow against our human ideas about how to be and what to do in the world. It also brings to mind the ancient energies that swirl in, around, and through us all. The strong, solid, rooted stance of Sitka spruce in a storm, for example, and the tender, twisting tolerance of weeping willow in a coastal gale. Holding steady in a high wind is an image that can inspire us to wholeheartedness, whole presence, and reflection when fear tugs at our hearts. Even as we sit still and silent, bearing down through the winds of thought, restlessness, anger, or not enoughness, we can maintain the very ground of our being and bend not to the wind-swept whims of what disturbs and distracts, but rather bow upward and outward to what enlivens and excites. Friends, tonight we invite you to wisp along with us as we explore some of the wisdoms to be reaped by the wind. There's nothing for you to do in this next hour, though you might want to have a journal and pen or drawing device close by. Rather, you're invited to sit or lay back and simply receive what wafts and whirls inside of you. Whether you enjoy the serenity of a peaceful puff, the excitement of a whipping windstorm, or the leaf-dropping draft of an autumn afternoon, we invite you to wonder, what does the wind have to offer you? And how do you stand steady in the squall? For now, let's sit with the soothing sound of Ayanaudi's wind song.
A rush of wind is unmistakable, invisible, and wholly present. If I'm outside or by an open window, the breeze can reach me, caress my skin with warmth or a cool touch, ruffle my hair, flutter the pages of whichever book I'm reading. If I'm indoors behind the closed windows, the wind can howl and shudder the windows so they vibrate. In a storm, it can howl and roar as it hurries past. What is this unseen existence? On a hot day, a breeze can calm me or give me sensations of being cared for and loved in my discomfort. And on a cold day, the wind nips at my skin, chiding me to keep moving and button my cloak more closely. I sense the wind more than the air. It's a tangible presence. Air I take for granted, more fool that I am. Without air, oxygen, all the life-giving gases my body needs to live, I would not exist. Wind, on the other hand, has power and makes itself known. It blows the leaves in the trees, grasses near my feet. It tosses my hair. It lets me fly my kite. Wind. Wind can also exert itself into a fearful demonstration of power. A few years ago, I was caught in a typhoon in Hong Kong, which accelerated unexpectedly from a rainstorm to a massive tower of energy, blowing trees, branches, debris from all sorts of doorsteps and houses and the plant world. I was desperately trying to get home in the middle of this storm, where my son was alone and waiting for me. And I had to walk when the bus would no longer drive because of downed trees blocking the road. But I walked. I bent my face down toward the ground to try and duck the push of the wind, to protect my head. And I stopped every few feet to regain my balance and hold on to streetlights or tree trunks. The rain blew in torrents in that wind. The wind was roaring with speed all around me. As finally I reached our apartment building, the wind whipped around and pushed me toward the doorway, toward safety. My feet were barely able to touch the ground. I fairly flew into that lobby, the wind tucking me into that safe space. As I ran up the stairs to our flat and in the door, to the great relief of my teenage son, I felt a rush of adrenaline fading. I could hear the fearful howling of the wind outside. I felt both astonished and full of wonderment that there could be such a mixture of menace and tenderness that I had experienced in that storm. In that journey, the ferocious winds were bringing destruction all around me, roaring with siren energy around every structure. The wind also returned me into my building, like a cupped hand gently helping a small bird into its nest. That energy, that persona of Kali, Manjushri, Shiva, all bound in a swirl of spirit, wind, terrible and wonderful, destructive and loving all at once. That presence delivered me literally through the storm. Here I was, safe with my boy in my arms and rain dripping off of me onto the floor. My understanding of wind, the spirit of wind, really changed that day, knowing how close I was to disaster. The most beloved showed up that day as well, with terrifying power and potential and tenderness, all mixed in that swirl of air. That same young man is a grown man now and living in Mongolia. I was fortunate enough to visit him there last summer, and I was delighted to be introduced to the local spiritual traditions, which are based in shamanism and Buddhism. Spirit there is known as wind horse, and wind horse gallops through the sky, blessing everyone. Prayer flags are placed everywhere along the plateau, fluttering colorfully in the breeze, until finally the wind takes the prayers printed and sends them to the universe. Or the wind takes the prayers that are tucked into stones that are placed with blessing underneath these flags from travelers and people going past. All their prayers, their hopes and aspirations carried outward to the benevolent universe. Wind horse is another face for spirit, playful, meaningful, gusting energy and immanent in the wide world. With every breeze now, I bow to the holy mystery, rushing and racing around me, wind horse cantering and reminding me that spirit blows life through this world, life in and out of my lungs, capacity and energy, a gift that gustily moves us all forward.
The Glimpse by Joyce Rupp. Walking the autumn corridors of Raccoon River Park, wet leaves sticking to my shoes, cool wind dancing on my face, my mind lost in work left behind, heaped on the office desk. Walking on the wooded path, eyes glazed and unseeing, abruptly alerted to swift movement, the flash of wide gray-blue wings, sweeping upward and away, leaving only a faint trace of presence in my mind's eye. I sought, looked then intently, but the precious moment escaped. The bird, possibly a large blue heron, moving on far beyond my sight. If only I had been mindful, lived fully in the present moment, allowed the beauty of the bird to envelop and carry me along through the unattended work. If only, if only. Instead, I returned with a heavy regret, but also with keen resolution to be with what is, when it is, awake and open to the unexpected, allowing life to charm me with sudden delight. I'd like now to share an Abenaki legend about the boy who tried to stop the wind, Gluskaba and the wind eagle. Long ago, Gluskaba lived with his grandmother Woodchuck in a small lodge beside the big water. One afternoon, Gluskaba decided, I think it's time to go out and hunt some ducks. So he grabbed his bow and arrows, got into his kayak, and began to paddle out into the bay, singing, Ki-yo wajine, yo ho hey ho. Suddenly, the wind began to blow, turning around his kayak and blowing him right back to the shore. Gluskaba began to paddle out into the bay again, this time singing his song a little louder. Ki-yo wajine, yo ho hey ho. Again, the wind blew, sending him back to the shore. 4 times he tried to paddle out into the bay, and 4 times he failed. He was not happy. So he went to the small lodge of his grandmother and blurted out, Grandmother, what makes the wind blow? Gluskaba, she said, a little exasperated. Why do you want to know? Because, Gluskaba, whenever you ask such questions, she lamented, I feel there's going to be trouble. She hesitated, then relented. Far from here, on top of the great mountain, a great bird stands. This bird is called Wind Eagle, and when he flaps his wings, he makes the wind blow. Ah, I see, said Gluskaba. Now, how would one find that place where Wind Eagle stands? Suspiciously, Grandmother Woodchuck raised her hand and pointed in the direction of the great mountain and said, That is where Wind Eagle stands. Thank you, Grandmother, said Gluskaba as he stepped out of the lodge, faced the wind, and began to walk. He walked across the fields and through the woods, and the wind blew hard. He walked through the valleys and into the foothills, and the wind blew even harder. As the foothills became the great mountain, the wind became very, very strong, blowing off Gluskaba's moccasins, then his shirt, then all of his clothes and all of his hair. Eventually, the wind was so strong that he could hardly stand. Then suddenly, just ahead of him, standing on top of the great mountain, Gluskaba saw a great bird slowly flapping its wings. It was Wind Eagle. Gluskaba took a deep breath, then shouted, Grandfather! Wind Eagle stopped flapping his wings and looked around. Who calls me grandfather? It's me, Grandfather, Gluskaba exclaimed. I just came up here to tell you that you're doing a very good job of making the wind blow. But it seems to me that you could do an even better job if you were on that peak over there. Wind Eagle looked toward the other peak. That may be so, he said, but how would I get from here to there? Gluskaba smiled. Grandfather, he said confidently, I will carry you. Donning a strong carrying strap made from the inner bark of a big basswood tree, Gluskaba suggested, Let me wrap this around you so I can lift you more easily. He wrapped the carrying strap so tightly around Wind Eagle that his wings were pulled into his sides and he could hardly breathe. Now, Grandfather, Gluskaba said, as he picked Wind Eagle up, I will take you to a better place. As he walked toward the other peak, Gluskaba came to a large crevasse, and as he stepped over the crevasse, he let go of the carrying strap, sending Wind Eagle sliding down into the crevasse, where he remained stuck. Now, Gluskaba said, it is time to hunt some ducks. He walked back down the mountain, and there was no wind. He walked down into the foothills, into the valley, through the forest, then through the fields, and the wind did not blow at all. By the time he returned to the small lodge by the big water, his hair had grown back, He put on some fine new clothing and a new pair of moccasins, grabbed his bow and arrows, went down to the bay, and climbed into his boat to hunt ducks. As he paddled out into the water, he sang his kayaking song. But as he sang, the air, he noticed, was very hot and still. Gluskaba began to sweat. Then he noticed that it was hard to breathe. Soon the water began to get dirty and smell bad, and there was so much foam forming, Gluskaba could hardly paddle. Again, he was not pleased and headed straight for the small lodge, again blurting, "Grandmother, what is wrong? The air is hot and still. It's hard to breathe. And the water is so dirty and covered with foam. I cannot hunt ducks like this." "Gluskaba," she said impatiently, "what have you done?" Nothing." "Gluskaba, tell me what you have done." Gluskaba told her about visiting Wind Eagle and what he had done to stop the wind. "Oh, Gluskaba, Tabaldik, our creator, set Wind Eagle on the great mountain to make the wind because we need the wind. The wind keeps the air cool and clean. It brings the clouds, which give up rain to wash the earth. It moves the waters and keeps them fresh and sweet. Without wind, life will not be good for us, our children, or our children's children." Gluskaba nodded. "Grandmother," he said, "I understand." And again, he began to walk. He walked through the fields and through the forest, into the valleys, up into the hills, climbing the great mountain. At last, hot and sweaty, he came to the place where Wind Eagle once stood. And from there, he looked down into the crevasse and called, "Uncle!" Wind Eagle looked up as best he could and replied, "Who calls me uncle?" "It is Gluskaba, uncle. I am up here, but what are you doing down there?" "Oh, Gluskaba," said Wind Eagle, "a very ugly naked man with no hair told me that he would take me to the other peak so that I could do a better job of making the wind blow. He tied my wings and picked me up, but as he stepped over the crevasse, he dropped me in, and here I am stuck." "Ah, grandfather, uncle, I will help you get out." Gluskaba climbed down into the crevasse, untied Wind Eagle's wings, and placed him back on top of the great mountain. "Uncle," Gluskaba said, "it is good that the wind should blow sometimes, and other times it is good that it should be still." "Yes, grandson," Wind Eagle said, "it is."
After the drama of a midday thunderstorm, rumbling behind pounding rain, calm and a soft breeze descend on this damp world. Wet trees toss their leaves, whooshing as they swing to and fro this way and that. I wander out of my warm house into this new washed world, past friendly trees that line the garden. Silver birches wave merrily, fluttering their pointy leaves like dear old aunties waving their lace handkerchiefs. The old hemlocks behind them are much more serious, thoughtfully peering into puddles and scrying some future visible in Gaia's mirrors. The ancient ones ignore the soft gray squirrels scampering along their branches, nor do they bother with me, one too young perhaps, or too human in my distractions. They overlook my warm body pressed against their trunks like an affectionate toddler hugging a parental leg. My bare feet treading sacred mounds of gnarled roots and fallen needles, fading green to brown. Above me, mischievous winds tease the branches into creaking conversation. The boughs moaning with each swing, a tree choir swaying while they sing, flinging raindrops out, blessing my upturned face with damp tree kisses. I laugh with delight, feeling cool water drip down the back of my neck. Gentle wind plays through my hair, a buoyant expression of air and energy, rising and falling, pushing into this earthbound body oxygen for my craving lungs, while I return breath transformed for trees and all growing rain-soaked life around me. We pulse together, inhaling, exhaling, a dance of reciprocity, this lung-born wind binding with spirit. I close my eyes and breathe and breathe and breathe. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for enjoying the wind, sharing the wind.